have quite a topical situation in Azerbaijan and Armenia going on that was sparked recently. And do you feel when we think about those more traditional battlefields that they will be going away over time, that robots will play a bigger role, perhaps at some point the only role, so that it is just a robot against robot, maybe still with a human person who controls the joystick or something? But how do you see where we're going with this?
Thank you. That is a very frightening thought to think that we will have something like Skynet around us with all the assets familiar to us from Terminator movies, and nobody wants that. Ask any military, any officer, they would say, what do you mean by giving control away to some fully autonomous weapon system? It's nonsense. We want always to have control over our troops' operations. And it doesn't matter, is it human troops, is it robotic troops? We, as commanders, need to have control over our assets. So I think everybody, at least in NATO member states, agrees that human control over lethal actions should be the number one ethical consideration that we all take into account. And this discussion has been going on at UN, at European Union, at the US Department of Defense has developed their own policy of ethical use of AI. So everybody agrees basically that human control should always maintain over lethal decisions, like pulling the trigger. So now in the future, we definitely will have much bigger role of robots. And it's easy to extrapolate because we have seen during the last 30 years drones, which are unmanned assets, basically robots. Drones were introduced in Gulf War almost 30 years ago. And from there up to now, they are becoming almost most important assets of a conflict. Like in the same Armenian-Azerbaijan conflict, we see what devastation Azerbaijani drones are doing on Armenian ground forces. That is really very, let's say, very sad to see what's happening. And but the fact is that these robotic assets do a lot of work for the armed forces. Another example, bomb robots. When in the beginning of Iraq war, Desert Storm, we had, if I'm not mistaken about statistics, it took about 5 improvised explosive devices to injure or kill American or Allied soldier. At the end of the conflict, it took around 80 explosive devices to injure a soldier. So technologies allowing to detect and remove explosive devices became so much more developed over this time. And that is one example I like very much because it helps to make the battlefield more humane. One could say that why do you do this military stuff at all? Wouldn't it be more kind of friendly not to work on defense at all? And I would reply, yes, in distant future, where all people live without having bad thoughts. But in the realistic world, we have conflicts of interests. And as long as we don't have united federation of the earth, where we could all be part of the world living in harmony, which I believe we will eventually achieve, and I would very much like to see that happening. Until then, we need to build up our defenses to avoid conflicts.